Magic Treehouse, Time of the Turtle King. Written by Mary Pope Osborne. Chapter 3. The Enchanted Islands. Jack tucked Morgan's note into his back pocket. Then he followed Annie down the rope ladder to the beach. "Head toward the boat dock," said Jack. "We can ask for information there." As Jack and Annie started walking, their hiking boots made tracks in the white sand. The breeze smelled of salt water and fish. They walked between pink lizards sunbathing on the beach and seagulls picking at seaweed. "This place has a ton of wildlife," said Annie. "Yep, I bet you don't know that the Galapagos have over 9,000 different types of creatures," said Jack. "I know that," said Annie. "Right, you're a world turtle expert too," he said. "Sorry." They skirted around sandpipers running toward the water, and birds with big blue feet waddling at the ocean's edge. They passed a couple of sea lions resting on their backs. The sea lions lifted their heads to look at Jack and Annie. They seemed to smile. "Living the dream," Annie called out to them. Jack laughed. "They seem so relaxed and unafraid," said Annie. "There's a reason for that," said Jack. "For millions of years, the Galapagos Islands were cut off from the rest of the world, so the wildlife here never developed a fear of people." "Yes, I know," said Annie. "That's why explorers used to call the islands the Enchanted Islands," Jack went on. "They thought all the creatures were under a spell." "Yes," said Annie, "I know. In fact—" Jack interrupted her. "And did you know the islands were created by volcanoes under the ocean? Over millions of years, layers of lava turned into islands." "Well, yes, Jack, I know," said Annie. "In fact—" "And," interrupted Jack, "there are still 13 active volcanoes on these islands. Did you know that?" "Jack," said Annie, "we're both world turtle experts. Everything you know, I know too." "Oh, right," said Jack. "In fact, today there are 6 active volcanoes here on Isabella Island alone," Annie added. Said Jack. "Maybe we should ask someone about those volcanoes." "Oh, wow, brown pelicans," said Annie. "I love pelicans." Jack and Annie had arrived at the wooden pier that stretched out into the water. A number of brown pelicans hovered near tied-up vessels. An older man with a beard was hauling in a fishing net from his boat. "Look," said Annie, pointing. "Tourists." At the end of the pier, passengers were stepping off the boat Jack and Annie had seen. The writing on the boat said Galapagos Cruises. The tourists wore baggy shorts, flowered shirts, and sun hats. They carried beach bags and cameras. "Mister, where are the taxis?" a man bellowed at the fisherman. The fisherman didn't look at the tourists. He just pointed to the 2 white pickup trucks waiting near the beach. As Jack and Annie stood at the entrance of the pier, Jack held his breath. Would the tourists see him and Annie as world turtle experts? But as the group bustled by, everyone was talking and laughing loudly. They passed Jack and Annie without a glance. A moment later, they were all piling into the white trucks by the shore. "Okay, let's go talk to that fisherman," said Jack. "We'll find out if he sees us as experts." "Good idea," said Annie. "We'll ask him about the turtles." "Yeah, and we can ask about the 6 active volcanoes here on Isabella Island," said Jack. As Jack and Annie started down the pier, their hiking boots thumped over the worn wooden planks. "Hi, guys," Annie called out to a couple of pelicans perched on the railing. Suddenly, One swooped up into the air and stole a small fish from a seagull. "Whoa, not fair," Annie shouted at the funny-looking bird. The pelican landed on the railing, threw back its head, and swallowed the fish whole. Jack and Annie both laughed. "Listen to me," Annie said to the pelican. "Don't take what doesn't belong to you." The pelican lowered its head. "Good, you should be embarrassed," Annie said. Jack laughed again. "Annie, don't forget, when we meet people, you can't treat wildlife like they're human," he said. "Experts don't do that." "Oh, right," said Annie. "I guess I just slipped back into my real self." She and Jack kept walking toward the fisherman. "Hello," Jack called out. The man didn't turn around. "Don't worry, more tourist taxis coming soon," he said in a grumpy voice. "Actually, we're not tourists," said Annie. The fisherman looked over his shoulder. Jack and Annie pointed to their badges. The fisherman seemed startled. "Oh, I see," he said. "You're world turtle experts. My mistake." "The magic works," thought Jack. "Are you from the National Park Service?" the fisherman asked. "No, we've just come from America to study Galapagos turtles," said Annie. "Can you tell us the best spot to do that?" asked Jack. "You need to talk to the people at the Giant Tortoise Center," the man said. "Sounds good," said Jack. "How do we get there?" "If you're walking, just head toward a town," said the fisherman. "Take the wildlife trail off the main road. Follow the boardwalk through Flamingo Lagoon, and you'll come right to the center." "Great, thanks," said Annie. As they started away, Annie grabbed Jack's arm. "The magic works," she whispered. I know," said Jack. "Wait," he called back to the fisherman. "Excuse me, sir, one more question. What's the volcano activity these days?" The fisherman frowned and shook his head. "Not good?" said Jack. "The Blue Hill volcano erupted 2 weeks ago," the man said. "The lava is still flowing." "Oh, wow! Where is that?" asked Annie. "About 35 miles from here," the fisherman said. "Oh, good. It's far away," said Annie. "So I guess that means we're safe?" said Jack. "Completely," the man said. "Thanks for your help," said Annie. "Have a nice day," said Jack. As they walked back down the dock, Jack smiled. "That's good," he said. "For once, we're not in danger." Chapter 4 Flamingo Lagoon. Jack and Annie stepped off the pier. They walked up a sandy road into a small town. They passed a few small shops, Seaside Gifts, the Green Lizard, the Tortoise Tavern. "This isn't much of a town," said Jack. "It seems pretty empty." "Maybe the active volcano is keeping most tourists away," said Annie. "That's silly," said Jack. "The fisherman said it's completely safe here." "True," said Annie, "but bad news can scare people." "Stop," said Jack. He pointed at a sign marked Wildlife Trail. "There's the path that the fisherman told us to look for." He and Annie left the road. They walked down a pebbled path shaded by tree branches. "Oh, wow! A pink iguana!" said Annie. They stopped to look at a huge lizard resting on a branch. The iguana had pale pink skin with dark stripes. "It looks like a tiny dinosaur," said Annie. The Galapagos are the only place on Earth where pink iguanas live, said Jack. They've been here about 5 million years. I know, said Annie. Come on, there's the boardwalk over the lagoon, said Jack. He and Annie headed over the raised wooden walkway. As they crossed the murky water, they saw even more wildlife. The dark pond was filled with ducks. Birds were cheeping and flitting everywhere. Mockingbirds, finches, Jack said. Herons and flamingos, said Annie. Blue herons stood in the shallows. A pair of flamingos waded together with slow, graceful steps. They dipped their heads into the water. They're like dancers taking a bow, Annie said. She jumped up and down and clapped her hands. Yay, she shouted. Annie, you need to calm down, said Jack. If you want people to see you as an expert, you can't act like a kid. Right, sorry, said Annie. Jack and Annie left the boardwalk. They followed a short trail through a dry, mossy forest. The air smelled of mint. Bright yellow iguanas and long green lizards rested on tree trunks and branches. The whole island seemed alive with amazing creatures. The forest soon opened into a clearing. A one-story wooden building was bathed in sunlight. It had a thatched roof and a yard with fencing. A sign said, Giant Tortoise Center. That's it, said Annie. A turtle expert's dream. Right, but when we go inside, remember that experts act cool, said Jack. Cool is boring, murmured Annie. Yeah, but knowledge isn't, said Jack. And we have tons of it. As they walked up to the entrance, 2 white pickup trucks rolled into a parking area near the center. Oh, brother, it's the tourists from the Galapagos cruises boat, Jack said. What's wrong with that? Asked Annie. I just hope they don't get in our way, Jack said. Don't worry, said Annie. We don't even know what we're supposed to do yet. Jack and Annie stepped into the lobby of the Giant Tortoise Center. The lobby was filled with wildlife displays and a map of the building and grounds. A tall young woman with a long black ponytail stood at a counter. She wore a green uniform and was quickly making notes as she talked to someone on the phone. Yes, sir, I understand, she said. Emergency action was taken earlier today, but now they must try again. What emergency action? Jack wondered. The woman glanced up and saw Jack and Annie. They both pointed to their name badges. The woman's eyes grew wide. I have to call you right back, she said into the phone. Then she hung up. Welcome, Jack and Annie, she said. I'm Carmen, the only guide at the center right now. No one told me important guests were coming today. Our director should have been here to greet you, but we have an emergency. Before Carmen could finish, the tourist group from the boat banged through the front door.